Suppose that one day you're walking through Tallahassee and you have a nice new business suit that you've just bought. It cost you about $1,000. Yeah, spiffy suit. Woo. And as you're walking through the park, loving yourself, strolling out in the sun, you get close to a nice shallow pond. And as you get even closer, you see there's a child in the pond, thrashing about, gasping for air, screaming in between the gasps. And you realize it would be really easy for you to wade into the pond and rescue the child. But the problem is, this pond has all kinds of nasty Florida pond scum in it. And you know that this is the kind of pond scum that does not easily wash out of nice new business suits, even with dry cleaning. And also your business suit is very difficult to take off in a timely fashion. So the dilemma is between your fancy business suit and the child's life. The dilemma is, I think, a moral question, and I'm interested in what your initial response is. So I'd like to get a show of hands about it. So if you think it would be morally suspect to walk on by and let the child drown, I'd like you to raise your hand. Okay. That seems to be a majority of the people in the room. Now, this is one of the most famous cases in contemporary moral philosophy, believe it or not, and it's due to the philosopher Peter Singer. Before I talk about why that is later in the service, it's now time for me to talk about giving to this institution, to UUCT. We may not rescue children out of tiny ponds, but we are a home for liberal faith. We're a hub for self-understanding and spiritual growth. We're a bastion in the culture war, as some people say. And I think this institution is very worth supporting, and I hope you'll do that this right now.
I'd like to introduce Jay Quigley. He's our guest in the pulpit today. And Jay is a PhD candidate in FSU's philosophy department and a recent co-founder of Students for Ending Poverty at FSU. His dissertation focuses on the role of emotions in moral reasoning, and his recent research addresses how to balance our duties to reduce suffering against our duties of special relationships. And a word from Greg.
Yeah, I'm not Jay, but that's Jay. We're passing along a bowl full of index cards and pins, and I think it'll become clear as you listen to Jay, there might be a few things you want to jot down for reference. We really wish we had those at 9 o'clock. And so anyway, please feel free to take some notes. There will be no quiz. Well, maybe just a moral-based quiz.
So the topic of my message today is effective altruism, and I'm going to note from the outset. So this is the idea of effective altruism is doing unselfish things for other people, reducing their suffering, increasing their well-being. But it's not just people that effective altruists are concerned. They're also concerned about animals and future people. But this will be about present-day suffering of human beings. We'll start with some UU theology. We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all persons, no matter what their race or ethnicity, no matter whom they love, even if they have a tall, pointy head with weird black hair sticking up out of it, we think that they matter. Even if they incessantly smell like stale Doritos, they're important. And that also goes for wherever they live. No matter what continent or nationality they call home, they matter. And this ties in with our view that we affirm and promote the goal of world community. At the bottom right-hand corner is the world flag. It's the best world flag I could find on the internet. I think that all of the things I've said so far are pretty much moral common sense. And I think another piece of moral common sense is that if I could easily rescue somebody and save their life at little to no significant cost to myself, it would be a bad thing for me to not do that. And I think that also is true if I could prevent not someone's death, but their being blind for a few years, or if I could prevent them from being unable to talk throughout most of their childhood. But this is relevant because in our world, children do die all the time. Literally, every 5 seconds, another child dies in the world. This amounts to 18,000 children in a day, and 6.6 million children per year as of 2012. Now, UNICEF thinks that that's good news because the number has been cut in half since 1990. But every one of these children's lives matter, and these deaths are mostly due to easily preventable causes, such as diarrhea, pneumonia, measles, malaria. And all of these are very easy things to prevent. And the reason they're not prevented is because the health systems in the world, in the parts of the world where this happens, just aren't that good. They're underfunded. The underlying problem is extreme poverty. This is not poverty like we think about people being below the U.S. poverty line. This is, think about living on $1.25 or less per day. That's like $400 per year, and trying to afford everything that you need to survive. Sounds pretty difficult, and it's for this sort of reason that health in the developing world is a lot harder to achieve. It's the reason that the slums of Mumbai, India, look something like this often, low substandard housing, poor trash removal, and so on. And it's not just mortality that are the health issues. There's morbidity of all kinds. Schistosomiasis, for example, is one of the so-called neglected tropical diseases, and I'll be talking about it more. It's due to a small worm that infects the intestines and causes prolonged chronic illness, lots of abdominal pain, and people miss lots of school and work because of schistosomiasis. There are many other easily treatable conditions, such as trachoma and cleft palate, others that I can't even talk about. There's so little time. But the life expectancy in the developing world is much shorter. If you live in sub-Saharan Africa, good luck living much past 50, and some countries much past 40. Water and sanitation, often quite different, as some of the kids were very surprised. I could tell that the girl who lived in India just didn't have a bathroom in her house. Hunger, obviously a huge problem. Malnutrition correlates with that, and from the numbers I've got, about roughly a third of sub-Saharan children are under 5 or suffer from stunting due to malnutrition. There's many problems that I can highlight here, but here sitting in the West in our fancy church, having driven our relatively fancy cars here, sitting in front of the computer, having watched, cat videos, we're just, it's not clear what we can really do, is it? Well, the internet provides humongous opportunities to make our world much smaller. It's not just that we can Skype to people in Mozambique. It's that we can transfer our money to them in ways that were never possible decades ago. And international aid agencies, moreover, have vastly expanded, and it's very easy to change the world with our pocketbooks in ways that it never was before. But you might wonder, how can I really know that a charity I might want to support is really a good charity? How can I know they're going to use funds in the way that is a responsible way to use them? And I think that a revolution in the world of philanthropy occurred in 2007 when a charity evaluator named GiveWell was founded. They do in-depth charity research. They look to identify charities that have highly effective interventions, that employ them in a cost-effective way, and that are transparent and accountable to their donors, and also have room for more funding. And so they look at thousands of charities, and per year only recommend about 3. And Giving What We Can is also displayed. It's a similar organization that also ranks charities in this sort of way. And these 3 charities are the top charities, according to these organizations, in the last few years. Against Malaria Foundation provides mosquito nets for about $3 per bed net, which will roughly cut in half somebody's chance of contracting malaria. And if you buy somewhere between 200 and 1,000 nets, you're guaranteed to save a child's life. Give Directly does cash transfers directly to people in Kenya and Uganda. The idea is that people know what their needs are better than a lot of aid organizations, and it's very cheap to just give them money with no strings attached. My favorite at the moment is the Schistosomiasis Control Initiative. I mentioned that schistosomiasis is a intestinal worm that keeps people out of work and school and causes them lots of pain and suffering and chronic illness. I think maybe the most important point I can make to you is that your dollar goes so much further overseas in the developing world than it does here for domestic charities. So if you buy roughly 100 treatments, so schistosomiasis treatments are like 50 cents a treatment. 100 is like $50. For every $50 roughly, or 150 on the very highest estimates, you save 1 year of healthy life. So we'll take 50 as our number. It's right in the middle of the range from 30 to 80. And let's compare it to the best domestic U.S. charity that GiveWell could find, which is the Knowledge is Power program. We'll say that a scholarship for a student for 1 year is $10,000. The same $10,000 you might spend on that one student, which would be a really wonderful thing to do for someone, could have saved 200 years of healthy life by giving out by paying for schistosomiasis treatments. So it really pays to understand the effectiveness of your donation. And I just want to really make this point again, so I'll give you a second example. Let's say you've got $40,000 and you want to do some real good in the world and help someone, and you care about vision. One thing you might do is you could buy a guide dog for a blind person here in the U.S. And that would be a wonderful thing. But the same money could have been used to fund $40 trachoma treatments in sub-Saharan Africa for 1,000 people, curing them of blindness, or at least going a long way to that. And so even if you do the wonderful charitable thing of buying someone a guide dog, you have to ask yourself, are they really 1,000 times more important than the people whom I could have treated for trachoma? So I think it's really a moral issue that we take seriously the effectiveness of what we do with our money, not only when we spend it on ourselves, but even when we give to various charities. I think it's also important to understand just how wealthy we are. I make about $15,000 at FSU per year, and according to Giving What We Can's calculator, I am in the richest 10% of the world's population, which I thought was pretty amazing. That means that I'm 9 times as wealthy as the typical person in the world. They also point out to me that if I gave 10% of my income, I'd still be in the richest 12% of the world, and I would be 8 times richer than the typical person. The reason is the world income distribution looks like an L. And if you make $52,000 or more, you're exactly in the 1%, the 1.0% of the world. You may not think of yourself, if that's you, you may not think of yourself as the Wall Street banker type, the mega rich, but in the world you're the 1%. You're on the upward slope of this graph. Another interesting thing I've learned through studying this stuff is what I can do with all this extra wealth that I have relative to the other people in the world. And Giving What We Can's pledge calculator says if I work for another 40 years and give away, and I only make $20,000 a year, which I think is a low estimate for me, and I gave away 10% of that, then I could save 1,400 years of healthy life and 26,000 years of missed school just by funding schistosomiasis treatments. I think that's pretty cool. Now, there are lots of people who need this sort of thing. The 3 Give Well charities I mentioned, AMF, Give Directly, and SCI, altogether have a funding gap of about $53 million. So it's not like these problems are going to go away, but of course that's finite. Certain millionaires and billionaires could put a dent in that pretty easily. So for every $500 we might spend on something, a flat screen TV, that's 10 years of healthy life, roughly, that you could have prevented someone from suffering, or a group of people from suffering due to schistosomiasis, right? So it looks like if we really take seriously this analogy of the pond, that we could rescue someone at little to no significant cost, just some wealth that we have. It looks like morality is really demanding when we consider the world that we live in. Our spare money could be saving lives. And it looks like, man, if we really take this seriously, we need to start giving a whole lot, right? But I just recommended to you earlier in the service that you give to this institution, UUCT. Now, how am I going to square that, right? Because this morality is really demanding, and there's all these kids we could be saving. It's not clear that we would even have any left over if we did the moral thing to support local causes that we care about. And I'm going to briefly suggest a strategy for thinking about this, which is to divide charitable giving into 2 categories. And the first category is the best causes possible category. And the second one is the causes I care about, or discretionary spending, which will include discretionary giving. How do we justify personal spending in general? Well, my take is something like this. There are certain things that make life worth living, and those things include relationships and projects, collecting butterflies, having game night with the family. Maybe it doesn't make your life worth living, but it makes, all right. Someone was laughing at particular examples. But it would be absurd to say that I need to give up the money that pays for my relationships and my projects just to fund somebody else's relationships and projects, if only because I would then have to say to them, no, you need to give up your money to fund somebody else's well-being, but they can't, not their relationships and projects, they need to give up that money. And then the people that receive that need to give up their money. But it looks like there's got to be some room for relationships and projects within our personal spending. But there seem to be common sense limits on how luxurious we can be in spending on these relationships and projects. So if your relationships will only really work out if you live in a palace, maybe you need to sort of work on the spending priorities within that relationship. Or if your life only has meaning, if your life only can be fulfilled with if you can keep on adding to your yacht collection, you should probably think about, supplementing that collection with a different sort of life completing pursuit, so that you can give the extra money to save the people in our world who are dying and suffering from chronic disease. It's along this model that I think I can justify some of the giving that I want to do. So, I spend on my projects and my relationships, and some of the projects that I have and the relationships I have are within this congregation. You are my church family. I believe in your ideals, our ideals, and I want to see to it that this congregation thrives and grows. And similarly with political spending, you might justify in this way. If you want to give to local homeless people as well, you can say, okay, yeah, sure, the $50 that I spend there might only fund a meal for 10 people for one night, and it could have provided a year of healthy life if given to SCI. But you can say, this is my community, and I want to promote it as part of my personal projects and as part of my life to have a thriving community. I also think of my donations to my forthcoming donations to Alliance Education Fund in this way. So not only do I think of this as something, a project of mine that I want to support, that my friend goes to East Africa to provide scholarships for young girls in Kenya and Uganda, Tanzania, as well. But I also, can hear stories from the ground and, give my input and talk through things with Della. I also think another reason for me to give there is that there are only a few people in the world who have heard of what she's doing with this excellent scholarship opportunity, whereas SCI is now kind of becoming famous through the effective altruism movement. So it's a little more likely that they'll become overfunded than that AEF will. So just to complete the example, the model I'm giving for you, and give you my own spending is so 10% of my income is going to go to SCI this year, and I'm also going to give about 1% apiece to AEF and to UUCT. So here we are in church, and this is a place that we practice religion, and you may recall that in other faiths there's something like a duty to give. So in Islam, you can't really be a Muslim, as far as I understand it, unless you give 2.5% of your money to charity. It's called zakat. Similarly, in Christianity and Judaism, there's the tradition of tithing, of giving 10%. So what are we going to do here in Unitarian Universalism? Well, I'm going to suggest something I think relatively easy compared to that, which is the personal best model. So the idea is that if you have already given none, then you should increase that. And if you've already given some, you should try to increase that, and always be setting a personal record for how much you give to worthy causes. And like I say, we're at church. I'm here standing in a pulpit, so it's my job to preach at you, to you, with you. Now, what I'm not going to do is have you come up to the front and kneel for me. You can if you want, but what I would like is to know who I could get in this room to give at least $10 this year to one of these three highly effective charities. And if you'd like to do that, I'd like you to raise your hand right now. Woohoo! So that's amazing, and I think that that you should try to set a personal best and not just make it this month. You've got 5 more days. This is the 26th. If now that I've got you at 0.0 something% of your income that you're donating, and you're going to continue doing your personal best, you can, if you would like, you can go online and pledge to make it official, since it'll appear on the internet, and that's how things become official, I guess. The Life You Can Save has a website where you can declare that you're donating a certain percentage of your income. And a final application for you is the following. You might have been planning on eating today, this afternoon, and one way that you can eat is to go to Soul Vegetarian Restaurant, which is on South Adams Street. And between 10 and 2 today, there's a special deal where if you go in and you say to them, I'm here to support Give Directly, or I'm here with Students for Ending Poverty at FSU, then they'll give 15% of your check straight to Give Directly, which in turn goes straight to the cell phones of needy Ugandans and Kenyans. And so I think we have time for about 3 or 4 minutes of questions.
Jay, I have no objection to your plans. I think we ought to give more. But the basic problem is that we are producing more people than this world can sustain. So I think we ought to give our money to those things that will help people to understand that we are producing too many people. That's our basic problem.
One of my favorite charities for those who are concerned with overpopulation is called Population Services International. It's certainly a concern. Now, I think if you're donating to the health of people who are already existing, you're probably not going to increase the population that much. You're just simply going to make existing lives better. Another thing, even if you donate to malaria nets and you're actually saving people who would have died otherwise, research I'm familiar with suggests there'll be, if they have a lower infant mortality rate, then they'll be less likely to have more children because they know that their current children are going to survive.
Could you repeat the part about Soul Vegetarian? Like what days can you go?
It's today.
Oh.
It's on your program right here.
Yeah, today, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
I convinced Jay that it would be a good idea to pass out the note cards so you could do a couple of things. One of them is to jot down all those fun web pages and suggestions and recommendations. The other thing is Jay gave an outstanding talk today, I think. And I kind of wish that this was in the middle of our pledge season. So if you turn your cards over to the blank side, you can write down a dollar number, a percent number, a goal to remind yourself of what you want to do when we come asking for your continued support for this church. And in terms of effective altruism, I'd like you all to know that we're going to be kicking off a better communication strategy with y'all to let you know where your dollars, when they come to the church, where they go. For example, our minister's discretionary fund, which we use very locally, we use for our own congregation, that fund is at an all-time high currently. It's in the neighborhood of $4,000. We've collected $4,000 or more in the past year for the shelter fund. We have several other, the refuge house that we're collecting for now, and our other Share the Plate partners over the past year that we've given hundreds of dollars to improve the lives of folks in and around this community. So be on the lookout. Meridian, blogs, our other communication outreach to you guys to let you know where the dollars that come into UCT go. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments?
An excellent presentation and a lot of great resources for us. What I liked was the world view, which we sometimes forget about. But you used the term spare money. And I would like to suggest that we all work on increasing our amount of spare money through various sustainable activities, wear shirts that may be 12, 15, 20 years old, and so on. You're not old enough to understand the implication of what that can mean, but I understand the implication of a lot of that. And we are just at a point in our society which is pushing us for consuming. And if we're going to have the spare money to do what we want ethically, we have to really fight that tradition within our culture.
Yeah, I mean, consumerism is definitely a deterrent to the attitude that, we owe something to people across the world who are suffering. However, I mean, economic growth is ultimately the way out of poverty, I think. So, we shouldn't think of greed as completely the enemy, but what we really, in order to prevent poverty from, in order to eradicate poverty, we need to stimulate economic growth in the developing world as best we can, and that pretty much involves giving. Effective altruists often give young people the advice to seek careers that are high-paying, so that they can then, in turn, fund 5 aid workers, rather than being 1 aid worker, for example.
Where is the Soul Vegetarian Restaurant?
South Adams Street. I failed to record the address, sorry. Okay, so it's just south of downtown, and Adams Street is 1 block west of Monroe.
Sorry about that. One of the things about folks in this country being so comfortable is subsidies and whatnot that the governments give corporations so that we get inexpensive food, inexpensive gas, that we don't pay what things actually cost. And because of that, the corporations are keeping us complacent by offering, for example, the thing in West Virginia where the water was polluted. The reason that all those people were on the same water supply was because that same company already polluted all the well water. So they keep us complacent by offering these inexpensive products that I think we should take advantage of and send some of this, the gifts that the corporations have been giving us, and send them other places where they will be more appreciated. And as far as the lowering the population goes, there are 2 kinds of, there's R selected species and a K selected species. R selected species have lots of babies, so that the babies take care of the family. K selective is they have 1 or 2, because they don't need to have a whole bunch. For example, we are K-selected species. So if we better the lives of all these people who are having so many kids because they need it in order to support themselves in their old age, then I think the whole world would be better off.
So on overpopulation, I would say there's great stuff on Giving What We Can's website about that. And another way to make a difference is not simply to give, but rather to convince rich people, corporations to give themselves. And I think we're out of time for questions.